Hello and welcome to another episode of the Omnibus Podcast, Minnesota's best weekly breakdown of political news inside and outside the Capitol. I'm your host, Jeremy Munson, State Representative from District 23B for just a few more days. And with us, like always, is Walter Hudson, Representative-elect, soon to be sworn in as a State Representative from District 30A. The legislature starts next week. Gideon Tucker is once famously quoted as saying, "No man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session." And that couldn't be more true than in Minnesota, where the Democrats have taken control of all branches of government, and they are salivating, ready to spend our $17.6 billion surplus and just run afoul of everyone's life, liberty, and property here in the state of Minnesota. Walter, you're our greatest hope in the legislature. You're going to be sworn in next week. Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the House, or soon to be Speaker of the House again, has talked about the legislative priorities that she has on abortion, banning conversion therapy, giving driver's licenses to every single person who wants one, who claims residency here, whether they have permission to even be in this country or not, fund the AG office with a bunch of political priorities, implement red flag laws, ban certain guns, and of course, cram green energy down our throats even more so than the rhinos that have been doing that the past 20 years, and give paid family leave, mandatory requirements on every business in Minnesota. What are you going to do to save us, man?
Well, look, I mean, the only avenue for the preservation of anything resembling sanity or decency or morality is convincing Democrats on the margins, moderates in swing districts, that they are engaged in political suicide if they go along with this insane radical agenda that Speaker Melissa Hortman has put forward as the list of DFL priorities. I mean, this is nuts. What she has listed as the priorities for the legislature going into 2023, these are not the priorities of Minnesotans. You know, Minnesotans as a group are not extremely on board with the idea of telling parents that they can't raise their own kids, which is what the ban on so-called conversion therapy affects. It says you cannot transmit your values to your kids. I don't know that people fully understand the implications of what they mean when they said that, because of course everything is cloaked in euphemism when you're dealing with the DFL and when you're dealing with Democrats generally. And so they talk about conversion therapy as if it's, you know, some perverse Dr. Nick from the Simpsons style character in a room, in a therapy room with the water dripping from the walls and a bright lamp, yelling at a gay kid trying to convince him that he's straight. In reality, what they are going to affect, I guarantee you, and it's probably going to end up coming through my committee, the Children's and Families Committee at some point. What they're going to attempt to affect is if your son comes to you at the age of 9, which I've got a 9-year-old, and says, "Daddy, I feel like a girl." And all you say is, "No, you're not, son. You're a boy." You will be guilty under the law of a criminal offense when they're said and done for not affirming your son's random whims and fancies. That's how extreme what they're going to pursue is going to end up entailing. And I don't think that's what a Minnesotan signed up for. The great con is the way in which the left is able to frame their issues as being on the moral high ground and being in tune with the middle of where the average Minnesotan is at. But in reality, they are on the radical fringes, way out on the left in no man's land, where virtually no one is at except their most committed activists. But that's who they're there to serve. They're not there to serve you. They're not there to serve families. They're not there to serve children. They're not there to serve Minnesotans generally. They're there to serve their most radical political activists who are committed to dismantling the family and dismantling capitalism and dismantling life as you know it in this state.
Well, the conversion therapy ban, as last that I've seen it as it's written, only applied to licensed medical professionals who are registered with the state of Minnesota. But it certainly skirted right around, um, pastors, people of faith, who offer advice. And then from there, I mean, if they can just simply ban the conversations that a counselor would have with their patient, it would pressure people of faith to not have those conversations, and then certainly have the same implication with parents, right? The next step is to say, well, I heard you were talking to your son about his, his sexual orientation. I think that's illegal, right? It moves the needle so far that parents all of a sudden will be afraid to have conversations with their children when they question their sexuality, and that's the real threat. Is that they're just completely moving the line. In fact, there are no licensed medical providers in Minnesota who are doing the conversion therapy as the bill is written. They basically want to ban something that doesn't even exist in Minnesota, but it's certainly in how it's being reported in the media sounds like it is happening, and they want to just ban all discussion of it. However, what I've told even Paul Gazelka and in some other social conservatives is that what you should be doing is amending that legislation to also ban the other way around. You should not be able to medically alter children to change their gender. That should be something that, if you want to protect children, you should be protecting them from being permanently,
Right.
physically and chemically altered.
Yeah, I mean, this is what the Democrats are pursuing is most certainly a one-way conversion. I think that is the proper way to talk about it, because while they are advocating for banning so-called conversion therapy, which is in actuality an affirmation of a child's actual identity, they're also going to be pushing for all sorts of taxpayer funded, quote unquote, affirming care, which is, in fact, in reality, conversion therapy. You're literally saying you're going to convert a biological male into a female through mutilation and chemical poisoning, or a female into a male, vice versa. So, as is so often the case, they're just inverting reality and calling evil good and good evil, calling up down and down up. And the hypocrisy there is quite obvious. We just need to have the wherewithal to point at it and call it exactly what it is. This is, as usual, the emperor's new clothes. We have to have the audacity to sit there and point at him and say he's naked walking down the street. Doesn't he look silly? You should laugh at him. He's a moron. Like that's what we need to do. That's certainly what I'm going to be doing in the legislature, and we'll see how many folks join me in that endeavor.
Well, I hope that words matter so much, and I hope that you continue to call out conversion therapy as what they are doing to change people's gender or their gender identity or whatever they're talking about. As what we did this with paid family leave. We had the debate on the House floor, and I called on the author because we were at the same time we were debating paid leave. In the same omnibus bill was the ban on wage theft, they called it, which is where employers, it's something about when they how they handle tips and or overtime or something. And so I said, well, I'd like to talk to I'm call on the author of the wage theft provision. And it was the person that had wrote the, provision that they were calling wage theft. When in reality, I corrected them and said, no, I want to talk to the author of the mandatory paid family leave tax on employees. Because it really is a tax, right? You're taking money from every employee and putting it into a special account that people who go on paid family leave will take money from. So you're really taxing someone and then giving them their money plus some of the money from their coworkers. But that is wage theft as well. You're taxing others. And so people need to start calling it out like wage theft or like conversion therapy when you're talking about changing people's identity. Use their own words against them to remind them of the hypocrisy and make them defend their position And in reality, they'll be defending our position too.
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand and get my fellow Republicans to do one thing, the one thing I would have them do is reject the language of the left. Like, don't, when you adopt their phrases and terms and their lexicon, you are also adopting the premises that go with them. And so we really need to start calling foul on their premises, which often means calling foul on their language and correcting definitions and insisting upon establishing definitions so that we know what the hell we're talking about. Because that's how they get away with as much as they do, is by confounding you. It's like Batman with his smoke bomb. You know, that they want to distract you with their theatricality so that you don't know what it is that they're actually doing or where they're actually at or what their actual goal is.
This week, you were featured in an article that swept our nation as part of an AP news article about Minnesota's most diverse legislature and what it means for policy. You were there's 5 pictures of the talk about the how diverse the legislature is. I think you were mentioned, but there's no picture of you. But there's a non-binary legislator, which I think is ironic because either you're binary or non-binary, which I guess is still binary, right?
Is a binary. Right.
So I've always confused when people talk about binary or non-binary. Everything is binary now. And then you've got your first transgender House member, so that'll be interesting if you are in committees with him. And just a bunch of different people, different colors, nationalities, ethnicity, and then you get a mention in there because Walter Hudson is who's Black. You have a great quote in here talking about how we need to also be mindful of the diversity of the diversity, right, or something like that.
Yeah, diversity within diversity was the quote. And yeah, look, I mean, you're not the first person to point out that I wasn't pictured. I couldn't possibly care less. I'm sure there were plenty of people referenced in the story who were not pictured. But also, you know, this isn't why I'm going to St. Paul. I'm not going to St. Paul to fill a quota. Okay. I'm not going to St. Paul to check a diversity box or to be a diversity hire. I'm going to St. Paul in an effort to attempt to preserve what's left of Minnesotans' rights once the DFL has their way in their hellbound attempt to take everything they possibly can from you: your identity, your wealth, your property, your values, your children, everything. There's nothing you have that they don't claim and that they won't take from you if we're not able to slow them down. Even just a little bit. So that's why I'm going to St. Paul, not so that I can be featured in the Star Tribune, not so that I can be, you know, part of some historic, diverse legislature. None of that means anything to actual people at all. Okay. It is superficial. It is trivial. It is trite. It is boring. The things that matter to actual Minnesotans is their capacity to live their lives according to their own judgment, to keep what they own, to raise their own children according to their own values. That's what I'm going to St. Paul to effect.
Well, it is important once you get there to turn up the volume on your megaphone, and you'll find that legislators compete for the limited bandwidth of people who are tuned in to the political noise and the political news. So, any opportunity you have, you'll get an invitation if you're lucky to be on, like, PBS on Fridays if you want to hang out in St. Paul for an extra day. But take every opportunity to go out and speak your voice, because we need the conservatives out there as much as we can to actually push back and fight back, instead of trying to find some moderate Republican that's going to half-ass agree with the Democrat policies and their agenda, which is what typically happens. So I really wish you well. Have you met with your media person yet in the caucus, who's going to help do your press releases?
Yeah, I've had some conversation with the staff member who will be helping me out, my meteor writer. It's a little bit tricky in this interim because technically I can't get any. It's very limited the interaction that I can have with staff until I'm actually sworn in. And
Okay.
so existing members, incumbents have an advantage in that regard. But I have talked to him and introduced myself, and we've had those kind of introductory conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to make sure that you find your media person that gets assigned to you, as well as probably a half dozen other people, that they find your voice. Because when you're gonna, you'll be busy running from committee to committee, and you want to get out a press release, and you want to say this and this and this, that they have to learn what your voice is, in order to write a rough draft for you, to get your message out. And then for those listening, if you go out to Walter Hudson's legislative page, when that's up and running next week, you can subscribe to his weekly updates and get his information from that. He'll be able to send out emails on what's going on in the legislature, and that Walter builds his a list that's big in wide. You don't have to be in his district to subscribe to his updates, but it's going to be really important that he get the message out every week on what's going on in the legislature, to keep people in tune with what they should be pushing for, and when they should be calling their legislators to have them, ask to support his bill or his amendment, or this in the conservative agenda. So that'll be good. One of the things that came up, I think it was last week or the week before, the House Rules Committee voted to move forward with a plan to spend $500 million, basically polishing the marble on your new office building, and building a big addition, probably incorporating the light rail, mobile homeless shelter next door. But basically they claim that there is not enough security at the state office building where the House of Representatives have their offices. And I said in a previous podcast, I've been in my office late at night and had somebody knock on my door, because it is open to the public, which is a good thing. You want people to be able to come in and find their legislators, or go door to door and tell people what they should be supporting or not. And if you don't want to open your door, you don't have to. But the public should be welcome in the legislature to go and meet with their reps. That's part of the First Amendment, right? To address to address government with your grievances. And it sounds like they want to create this separation, just like they have in the state Senate building. And this is a concern of mine. We shouldn't be, dividing this up and creating this barrier. The reason why it's such a big concern now is because government continues to harm the public and infringe on their liberties and infuriate half the people in the state, that now all of a sudden they want to seek protection.
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I just don't buy it. I don't buy that security is the reason why they're doing this. I mean, if that were the case, I mean, lock the doors, right? I mean, it's pretty cheap. Just it's the mechanisms already exist. Turn the key, lock the building. If that's what you think you need to do in order to secure the legislatures, this is just wanting fancy new offices. That's all it is. This is the Senate got their fancy new building, so now we need to get ours. Um, there is, taking the politics and the fiscal consideration out of it, and just looking at it from my very narrow personal perspective. I do find it interesting. I took my family down there the other day, my immediate family, just to give them a little tour and get into my office for the first time. And I mentioned to my wife, I'm like, this kind of reminds me of when we attended the last Twins game that was ever played in the Metrodome before they tore it down and built the new stadium. And I feel a similar phenomenon taking place here, where I'm going to be serving in the last term where representatives from Minnesota will be in the current state office building, and then it's going to be refurbished, renovated, torn down, rebuilt, whatever it is they're going to do to create this new monstrosity. But you've been there, you know what it's like. I've been there many times in my capacity as an activist, a constituent, visiting various representatives for whatever reason. There is nothing wrong with the current building, nothing at all. It has tremendous charm and historic appeal, that would to tear it down or renovate it and turn it into something modern and cute so that legislators can feel important about themselves, is just unnecessary on its face, and it's certainly not worth $500 million, $500 million.
Yeah.
I mean, this is $200 million more than the Capitol renovation cost. That's insane.
Yeah. In the Capitol, I mean, that it was an incredible job that they did, but the Capitol is of so much more importance than the state office building,
Yes.
and the historical value and everything else. This is just way over the top. And of course, we know how this happens, where this is a $500 million project that's going to probably turn into $1 billion by the time it's done. And as most construction projects go that route. So it's just ridiculous. If it's a security issue, you could hire 20 security guards for the next 400 years, and you're still going to save money. This is just about self-importance, and unfortunately, the Democrats have this enormous surplus, so they're not cash poor, and they have the votes to do this. So it's going to be a ridiculous thing to spend money on. You really have to talk about how this money could be better used for Democrat stuff, right? Schools. How many schools could you renovate for this? How many early childhood programs could you fund? How many kids could you pay for preschool, right, across the state? And why are they spending this on this money? Not that you're advocating to spend that, but you need to put this in their perspective for their constituents on what a waste this spending is.
Well, the reason I'm smiling is because I was thinking, how many fake meals can you distribute from distribution sites through Feeding Our Future? There's all sorts of things you could spend this money on. But no, I mean, you're absolutely right. The thing that gets me is, this is money that it's not just that they're spending it, and it's not just what they're spending it on. It's the process that they utilize to come to the decision to spend this amount of money, and as you properly point out, basically a blank check more. Like they have an unlimited slush fund that they can utilize to bring this project to its conclusion. It's not capped at 500 million. Like you say, it could be $1 billion, could be more. And they didn't come to that decision through a deliberative democratic process, getting public comment, having hearings, having testimony, hearing from stakeholders. Like none of the things they claim to care about, democracy and hearing from the people and serving their communities, none of that played any role in this whatsoever. This was cloak and dagger. This was behind closed doors. This was pass it off to a committee that meets in secret in the interim to decide how much money we're going to spend, and that's how they came up with this number of 500 million. So, yep. As usual, the Democrats are Democrats in name only. They don't believe in democracy at all.
Yeah, well, I heard read a great article this week about a Minnesota politician that's going to go and attack all of the fraud, waste, and abuse at the state of Minnesota and Tim Walz's Department of Education. This politician wants to get a new inspector general at the State Department of Education, and this politician is, oh my gosh, it's Tim Walz. He wants to appoint a new inspector general to go after the fraud that happened in his own Department of Education after the Feeding Our Future scandal, in the probably $500 million of fraud that occurred for that food program. So how do the Democrats, who basically oversaw all of this fraud from the child? I mean, this has been going on for years with the child. The child care programs, right? The CCAP fraud that was about $150 million of fraud every year and had been going on for about 6 or 7 years. And then this fraud, which happened, which is at least $250 million, probably $500 million. And out of the 44 people that have been indicted, 11 of them are still receiving funding from CCAP for childcare centers that they quote unquote are, heads of. These are the same people that have been defrauding our child. They're doing this, and they're still receiving After a year, the scandals broke for the feeding our children thing. They're still getting childcare money. What the hell, Tim Walz? How is he supposed to get this fraud under control?
Well, I mean, why should he? What motivation has he? He was reelected. The media has his back. His party has no integrity. They're not going to hold him to account. They don't care about the kids. They don't care about taxpayers. They don't care about your money. They don't care about the law. They don't care about anything except funding their own political futures and providing slush funds for their constituency groups and their allied political activists. So there's nothing to hold him back. This is the inmates in charge of the asylum. They have no reason to behave well. Their character certainly doesn't motivate them to behave appropriately and justly, and to do anything to mitigate or end fraud, or certainly provide any sort of restitution to the taxpayer for the fraud that has taken place. And so they're not gonna. They're just not gonna. They're gonna tell you they are. They're gonna put forward these kind of fake um, press releases and statements, and maybe appoint somebody to a title, and give them a desk somewhere in a closet, but they're not actually going to do anything to change the current course of corruption in St. Paul. They love it. It serves them well. They just won the 2022 midterms being extraordinarily out in the open corrupt and getting political cover for it from the legacy media. So they have no reason to change.
I don't know. I don't even know where you go from here, man. I mean, this legislative session is going to be absolutely crazy with Democrats in full control.
Yep.
I mean, I know when we lost the House, at least we had the Senate to, some sanity, some stop to this crazy legislation. I don't know. I'm not looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. I don't know how to get people riled up to get him to the Capitol any more than what you've been out there saying, and in taking this seriously. But we need to formulate an effective attack to stop this legislation from getting crammed through.
Yeah, I mean, since the election, I like Republicans across the state. I was very jarred by the results of the election, and on election night, I couldn't believe how bad I felt about winning. You know what I'm saying? Like, I felt no sense of victory whatsoever about prevailing in my contest because of the broader election results, certainly here in Minnesota, but also nationwide. And I've had to ask myself in the intervening days and weeks, I thought that the the moment that I was being called to was to serve in a majority and actually get some things done. That's what I assumed I was being called to do. And being confronted with the reality that I have in fact instead been called to serving in a minority under total DFL control, in a situation that is, perhaps not unprecedented, but certainly not usual for the state of Minnesota. Usually we have divided government, or we have in recent decades. The only answer I can come up with that makes any sense is that I was called to this moment because I'm someone who's willing to just point at the emperor who's naked walking down the street and say, that guy looks ridiculous. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend this legislative session pointing at everything they're doing and calling it out for exactly what it is in the most accurate, harshest, boldest possible, stark moral terms, calling them evil when they're evil, calling them ridiculous when they're ridiculous, and just not caring about anything else, not caring about what people think, not caring about whether or not I get reelected, not caring about anything other than telling the truth. Because I don't know what else to do. We have nothing to lose. As not let me be very clear about what I mean. I'm not talking about Republicans. I'm not talking about conservatives. I'm talking about normal human beings who happen to live in the state of Minnesota. People who just want to live their life, raise their kids, go to work, earn a living, enjoy the fruit of their labor, and pursue their values. Normies, normal people have nothing left to lose in the state of Minnesota because the Democrats are going to take all of it. They're going to take everything they possibly can. They are going to loot and pillage for the next 2 years as much as they possibly can. And so all we have left is to just object, to just take our shoe and pound it on the table and call them out on it. And so that being the case, and also, by the way, during that intervening 2 years, they're going to be able to restructure the election process even more than they already have to tilt it further and further in their favor. So what I am now, what I view myself as a Republican in the House of Representatives, I'm an insurgent. I'm a rebel. I'm a guerrilla warrior going traipsing through the forest, try to take pot shots where I can in order to frustrate the empire. That's where we're at. And so that's what I'm going to do.
Well, in addition to the Democrats spending our enormous surplus here in the state, some Republicans, 18 Republican U.S. senators, sided with Democrats to pass this $1.7 trillion multi-subject omnibus spending bill in Washington, D.C., while the Democrats still had the majority. Right. Even though the House was going to take over the majority and could stop this insanity, Republicans in the Senate said, yep, and many of them retiring, and many Republican House members who were retiring signed on to this crappy bill to get all of this money spent for green energy. It funds red flag laws and everything else. And it's going to be trickling down on our state, injecting billions and billions of dollars and more money. And we can't, most of the money that comes from the federal government requires Minnesota to match certain percentage, maybe 20, 25% of that money to spend. So it forces you to spend more money. And you'll see Republicans talk about how they want to leverage federal dollars like it's free money. So it's, they will instinctively want to get out and start, doing all this other crap to spend money. And you'll have to deal with that as well. So it's going to be ugly on the spending side. It's going to be ugly on fighting for liberty. And I look forward to working with you through this show to bring light to much of this legislation to get people involved. You've got your legislative office. You've moved in there. Which floor are you on in the legislature? Are you second floor, third floor?
Third floor, room 317. Come say hi.
All right, we'll have to do that. You're on the co-ed floor with some Democrats and some Republicans, so that's interesting.
Yes.
And you've got a little bit more freedom since you're not kept close to leadership down on the second floor. So that's good too. It's a good sign. It's going to be an interesting session. When you start the session next week, you're going to go get sworn in on Tuesday. The session's going to start. You'll start your committee assignments. In the evenings in the legislature, for those listening, the lobbyists start going to St. Paul and hosting events just about every night. If you stay in St. Paul, which you don't because you live close enough to the Capitol, but for people like me, we had an apartment in St. Paul. And so in the evenings, you look for stuff to do. And all of these groups set up like buffets and meetings, and they have all these different events. And so you can usually make the rounds and get all the free food at the buffets at all these different places. But then you're getting lobbied. Pretty much you're working day and night at the legislature. And of course, a lot of people like you who are within driving distance will go to these events too. But you'll find that the legislature and everything and all the activity around it with lobbyists and special interest groups will really come alive next week. And we have a great event coming up with the Health Freedom activists, Mask Off Minnesota, and some other groups are holding a rally at the Capitol. When is that, Walter? Is it next Wednesday?
It is Thursday, I believe. Actually, it's the 5th. Okay. Let me verify that here. So
this will be at the Rotunda. The Rotunda in the Capitol, which we usually get about 2,000 people in the rotunda and hear from speakers, legislators like yourself. We'll get out there and talk about the legislation that's coming forward, probably removing the exemptions from vaccine requirements and such for schools and all these other attacks on health freedom. And so that'll be great to hear from conservative legislators in the rotunda. And it's, what is it, noon? Is that when it's going to be held?
It is going to be 1:30 to 2:30.
Okay.
That's what I've got
All
down.
right. So
So
1:30 to 2:30 on Thursday at the Capitol in the rotunda. Come on down and meet with your legislator and attend the rally. It'll be really exciting, and that'll be it's really something else to walk through the Capitol on the way to House session or something, and to see hundreds, if not thousands, of people at the Capitol rallying for their cause, whether or not you support them or not in their issue. It is just really great to see activists coming down to the Capitol to really to protest government.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's definitely needed because this is going to be one of the things that the Democrats are going to push is they're very anxious to take away your right to conscientiously object to the vaccination schedule. So they want to literally appropriate, annex your body and the bodies of your children, and force them to take medical treatment against their will without informed consent in defiance of established widely accepted medical ethics. This is what's astounding to me. The idea, you've got these medical ethics that if a doctor did what they're proposing to do under the auspices of quote unquote public health, that doctor would lose their license and potentially go to jail and certainly be sued. But they're trying to do it, under the euphemism of common good and public health, and somehow that washes it clean morally, and it's just not true. I mean, they're violating the ethical principles upon which the practice of medicine was founded.
Right. Last week, an article came out from Alpha News that talks about the number of Minnesotans that are moving out of state. And we talk about this at the legislature all the time, and it's really tough to have to gather the facts to back this up, because the population of Minnesota can sometimes increase while the income earners leave the state. Right, we become a haven for people who want to come and be on the taxpayer dime, but we're losing a lot of people to out of state. Alpha News had a great article about the percentage of people that are leaving, the income earners. There's also, as at the same time we hear about how the employment rate in Minnesota is at an all-time low, or sometimes the highest or the lowest in the nation. But there's also this weird trend called quiet quitting, and it's really about just low productive workers in the salaried workplace. Now, I've spent a lot of time in corporate America, and I've noticed in the last 20 years, 15 years, that things have gotten really soft in the office. You used to get there, used to work 60 hours a week to try to impress your boss, to work your way up, to do whatever it took to get ahead of others at work. You always dress the role, dress for the job that you want, not for the job that you have. And between casual Fridays leaking into now, we got this Zoom life where most people don't even wear pants to work. People are working from home and not putting in long hours. And now we get this trend called quiet quitting. Um, what do you think about this trend? And can you explain it to the
Well,
listeners?
it's interesting. Yeah, sure. So my understanding of it, from limited reading and watching of a couple of videos, is that it's a phenomenon of, the reason why they call it quiet quitting is because you're not actually quitting your job. You're not actually terminating your employment. What you're doing is you're putting in the least amount of effort that you can get away with offering, while still keeping your job. And so, the way they'll describe it is they'll say, well, I'm going to do what my job description says I'm supposed to do, but I'm not going to do anything more. So, the idea of, hey, we need you to stay late for a couple hours to take care of this urgent project that means a lot to the company this week. Their answer is going to be no, I'm not doing that. You're not paying me extra for that. I'm not going to go above and beyond the minimal requirements. We need you to come in this weekend. Same reason. We got something urgent we need to take care of. No, that's not part of the deal. You don't get me on the weekends. I need to take care of my mental health. I need to spend time with my family, my friends, and pursue my own interests. I'm a ukulele player as a hobbyist or whatever. Whatever it is that I do for me is more important than you, and it's more important than the company. And this is the general attitude, and it's something that is being it's being portrayed as unique to Gen Z. I don't know how true that is. But this newest, youngest generation of workers coming into the workforce with the expectation that they just don't buy into the idea that you should put your nose to the grindstone, you should strive to impress, you should try to distinguish yourself by offering greater value than the guy next to you. It's an inversion of that. It's very much this is what I'm worth. I'm entitled to X, Y, and Z, and if you don't provide it, I'll just quit. And if you ask me to do anything extra, I'll just quit and I'll go do something else. And there's a sense in which it is a kind of decentralized unionization, because when you get an entire generation of workers who are willing to do this, an entire generation of workers who are willing to say, yeah, I don't care about you. I don't care about what the company needs. I don't care about the mission statement or the goal of this organization. I'm here for me. And if you're not providing me with what I want in terms of my work-life balance and the compensation I think I deserve and my time off, if you scoff at the fact that I call off in the morning because my cat is feeling less energetic than usual, then screw you. I'll just go work for somebody who will give me better juju, better vibes. If enough people have that attitude, then it does in fact have the effect, ironically, through market forces, of driving the overall job environment in the direction of low productivity and high cost for labor. And that seems to be the direction that we're going. Now, as you could probably tell by the way that I'm describing it, I'm not a big fan of this phenomenon. Certainly as somebody who has, I've been in the workforce for a few decades at this point, a couple of decades at this point. I've served in supervisory capacities. I've served in managerial capacities. I'm currently an operations manager for a small business. I deal with training people, managing people, dealing with workforce issues. And it has been extraordinarily frustrating to deal with workers, to deal with employees who just have no sense of ownership over what it is that they're doing, don't care what impact their decision to quit, whether quit outright or quit early for the day, or not put in the effort to meet the customer expectations, or whatever the degree of quitting is. There's been multiple ways in which people have quiet quit that I've been privy to as a manager of workforce. And so I'm not a big fan of the phenomenon. However, I also recognize that there is some merit to the criticisms that the advocates of this phenomenon are citing. So they talk a lot about how, we had the pandemic. And during the pandemic, what happened? Well, you had a lot of companies that decided they're just going to lay a bunch of people off. You had government telling workers that they weren't essential and that they, doesn't matter, that you can go home. We'll pay you to stay home. There was this break of the kind of unwritten social contract between employee and employer, where the takeaway that certainly Gen Z apparently got, and that a lot of the rest of us got as well, was, we don't really care about you. You don't really matter. We don't need you in the workplace. We need you as long as we do, and the moment we don't, we'll get rid of you. And so this is kind of a reaction to that. It's saying, look, I mean, if you're telling me that you could just drop me, like a bad habit the moment it becomes slightly inconvenient or less than maximize profit for you, then I'm going to treat you the same way as an employer. I'm not going to put in anything extra for you. As long as you're serving my needs, great. The moment you're not, I'll go find somebody else. It's kind of this way of or at least it's portrayed as giving corporations in particular a dose of their own medicine, of treating your employer the way you perceive they have been treating you. And so, to the extent that there's truth there, I can kind of sympathize with it. The problem is that this is not sustainable, right? Like if this is the game we're going to play, where instead of being engaged in a competition of providing the highest value for the lowest cost, which is what the market is supposed to do, we're instead perverting it to a competition for putting in the least amount of effort possible while still getting enough money to barely live and scrape by and pay your bills. That's not a recipe for human thriving. That's not a recipe for civilization. That's not a recipe for competing globally against rivals like China and Russia and these other entities globally. And so I think we need to find a way as Republicans and as conservatives to address this phenomenon, to kind of get out ahead of it and figure out, where are the merits in the complaints that these quiet quitters and Gen Zers have, and create value propositions that say, all right, here's what we're going to do about it. Here's what we're saying should happen to address your concerns in a way that is not, let's just go to communism, because that's what the left is going to offer. The left is going to look at this phenomenon and they're going to say, yeah, this is fantastic. We should just all be communists now. So, unless we're willing to just cede that argument, then we need to come up with some sort of alternative.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with talking about what happened during COVID, and not only government, choosing which workers were essential and not, but then basically putting an enormous percentage of our workers onto social services, right? This unemployment, it made unemployment okay again. Like it was acceptable for a large percentage of the population to be not working. Corporate welfare was seen as just, it greatly expanded corporate welfare. Trillions of dollars were spent on paying people not to work for a year or more, and people got used to that. Now, the last 10 years in the corporate world, I think it was this infection from Silicon Valley that had this like casual atmosphere, video games at work. There's several corporations, Fortune 500 companies in the metro that I've worked for in the past 6 or 7 years that have break rooms that are quiet spaces. You could just go during the workday. You can just go in there and lay down for a half hour, however long you need to recharge. Several companies have these. Several companies have billiard tables within the cubicles, right? Just teaming spaces, play games, ping pong, billiards, video game rooms. All this stuff is just soft, and it's just like, maybe it was because the economy was doing great and it was hard to find workers. But this really has led to the softening of employees. And then now with COVID on top of it, I have a hard time leading millennials and Gen Zers because they need constant feedback that they're doing a good job and that, you can't be critical of their work. When I was at Target Corporation, it was, you have to socialize all of the issues with people ahead of the meetings, because God forbid you actually disagree with somebody's idea at a meeting. It would be offensive. So you need to, socialize them through, 5-minute coffee meetings at the coffee store. So I think the workers have been softened over the past couple of decades. And I think people just need to get to work, put their nose to the grindstone and actually work. And I think that heading towards a recession, where there's going to be mass layoffs or the mass automation of workers, because of the health benefits and everything else that government's going to be mandating of them, thanks to your legislature that's going to be mandating sick and not even called paid family leave. It's called sick and safe time. If you're just sick, but if you just don't feel safe at work, you want to take some time off, you can take some time off. And the employers and your coworkers will be forced to pay for it. That's going to be even the further softening of employees. So I think employers are going to revolt and just be like, shave workforce, automate their jobs, deal without, and we're going to have high unemployment again. And the tables will turn.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is not sustainable. You cannot have an economy that deprioritizes efficiency and productivity. I mean, it's insane. People look back at like the Mad Men style era, like, the 50s, with guys with canters of whiskey in their office. Of like, oh, that was crazy. They were smoking in the office. They were drinking in the office. Yeah, but they were getting their work done. They were working their butts off with their nose to the grindstone, um, doing the job and producing value for their firm, for their organization, and competing in the marketplace. And so, it's not that the idea of having like a pool table at work, or a room where you can go and rest for half an hour, like, these things aren't inherently bad. And I don't necessarily believe that the solution is, well, we need to target those things and get rid of them. I think it's what they represent. I think it's what the problem is, the ideology and the philosophy and the worldview that brought these things to us, and the expectation that has been created amongst an entire generation of American workers, apparently, that of what work is for and what they are for as people. One of the comments, I saw a video, an NBC News video, that was kind of a compilation of different social media reactions that people have had to this phenomenon. And one of the quotes that really struck me was there was this gal, this Gen Z gal, who complained about the fact that her company doesn't care about her holistically. That was the quote. They don't care about me holistically. And all I could think about is like, are you kidding me? Like, what, you expect your employer to care about you holistically? Like, what does that mean? Like, your spirituality, your mental health, uh your past, present, and future. Like, you want your employer to care about you like your mom. That's basically what she's saying. Is the expectation is that the entire world is going to regard you as its child. That is not a reasonable expectation. And it's also, I think, not a desirable expectation. Like, I don't want an employer who thinks of me that way, who regards me that way, who's concerned about me holistically. Get out of my business. I want an employer who is single-minded when it comes to me, single-minded about my productivity, cares only about the value that I'm providing to the organization, and that so long as I'm providing that value, doesn't care at all about anything else that I'm doing, anything else that I'm saying, anything else that I am, anything else about me at all, because it's none of their damn business. And that is a completely different compartment of my life than the rest of it. And I think this is kind of indicative of sort of the overall trend. I mean, I think we talked last week, or the last time we put together an episode, about the whole child. Does that
Yep.
ring a bell?
Yep.
In education? Yeah. So it's kind of the workplace extension of this whole child phenomenon in education, where suddenly the expectation is that the institutions in our lives, instead of being compartmentalized to a particular purpose, my doctor is concerned with my medical care, my therapist is concerned with my mental health, my educator is concerned with teaching me the skills and knowledge I need for my career, my employer is concerned about my productivity, my work. Instead of having these compartments, we now expect that each and every one of them is going to be wholly concerned with every single aspect of my life, and that they're all going to work in concert to kind of nursemaid me through my moods and my whims and my ups and my downs and how I'm feeling and how I'm doing. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's not even like functionally possible for all the institutions in life to do that. They're going to be competing with each other if they're all crossing out of each other's lanes and into each other's lanes to try to affect this. And I also don't understand like why it's desirable. And what I end up coming back to is it really does feel like we've arrived at a brave new world. We've arrived at that Aldous Huxley point where the expectation is give me my soma, dull my senses, tell me I'm pretty, and feed me and take care of my whims. And that people don't have a desire to be independent, to be self-motivated, to be ambitious, to produce something for themselves. They want to be acknowledged. And we've transitioned from the way it used to be historically up to this point was you aspired to achieve and you sought the honor and glory that came with the achievement. Now we've replaced that with you show up as is and you expect to be honored and glorified for who you are because you showed up. It fits with the identity politics. I'm a transsexual Latinx, Mormon or whatever, like whatever hyphens you can string together in terms of your identity. You show up and you expect to be affirmed and glorified and honored for being that rather than achieving anything. And achievement actually becomes like an offensive concept because it's, well, why would I need to achieve anything in order to be honored and glorified? Look at who I am. Look at my resume. Your resume used to be here's what I've learned, here's what I've done, here's what I've accomplished. Now your resume is here's what I am. Here's where I came from. Here's my identity. Pay me. And that's the new expectation from this generation. And so it may be futile to try to come up with a conservative response to that. But I think the place you start is by trying to plant the seed of doubt in people's minds of, is this really what you want? Like, do you really feel fulfilled by putting in the least amount of effort that you possibly can in order to achieve nothing in hopes of being patted on the head and told you're special specifically because you're not?
Well, I think that what we can both agree on is that it's not sustainable, and that if the free market were to be allowed to work, it will react by laying off those workers who are quote unquote quietly quitting. Unfortunately, if we head into a recession, the soft hand of government will come down and comfort those on that are quietly quitting and protect them and pay them perhaps to stay home and to do nothing. But I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope that people will. I hope we can step back and watch what happens and point our finger to the cause, to the real cause, to the market forces that are triggering mass layoffs and shifting jobs overseas because our workers are all of a sudden becoming unproductive. So I hope that happens. And speaking of showing up to work and just hoping that people glorify you, you're going to be showing up to work next week to get sworn in as our new legislature, and hopefully you guys will work your ass off and not be quietly quitting because why show up to work? Why put in the extra effort when we're in the minority? You better be loud,
Right.
proud, and fight like hell for us up there at the legislature.
I don't know any other way to do it. And this interim during which I had that big to do regarding my comments at the Mask Off event, and there've been other things here and there. It's been very, I don't know, disconcerting might be too strong of a word, but I'm just not quite sure what to anticipate regarding this experience and how it's going to pan out. But one thing I do know is that I just don't see any other way to be than loud and proud and aggressive and bold and calling it like I see it, because what else is there? You there's this notion that is floated that, well, you need to be mindful of the a couple of things, the polling, where the polling is on this issue or that issue, or alternatively the relationships. If you come out too hard against Democrats, then they're not going to want to work with you, and they're in the majority, and you might not get your bonding for your wastewater treatment plant or whatever it is. Listen, I just don't care about any of that. Sorry. And if my constituents don't want to reelect me in 2024 because they think I should be a pageant queen who secures bonding, like, the status quo, then okay, I guarantee you there'll be plenty of people to choose from who will be willing to do that, who will be willing to wave in parades and play nice and go along with the madness. But that ain't me. And I've been very honest and upfront about the fact that ain't me, and that I'm here to tell the truth and fight for what's right. And, damn the torpedoes. And so we'll see how that works out. It's not going to work out one of two ways. It's either going to prove that Minnesota has no stomach for the truth and doesn't care about people's rights, which, that's a possibility. Maybe that's what it'll prove. Or it's going to shake loose this monopoly that the Democrats currently have on the perceived moral high ground, where they're the ones constantly talking about, what's good for Minnesota and unifying us and bringing us all together, when in reality, they want anything but.
That's right. Well, before you're sworn into the legislature, we're going to celebrate the new year this weekend. And I will celebrate I just went out to Wikipedia to check my age. I will be 47 on New Year's Eve. So I'll be out celebrating my birthday and the last few days of being a state representative, which really I don't do anything anyway since we're not in session and I don't have an office anymore. But officially next episode, you will be a state rep and I will no longer be in office. So we have that to look forward to, the handing of the torch, so to speak. Walter, I wish you luck next week. It's going to be exciting for you and your family, and at the same time going to be pretty disheartening when you see all the bills be introduced for all the crap that we've been fighting against these past many years in politics. So I wish you luck, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in for another hour of the Omnibus Podcast, where all subjects are germane.